Hey everybody, I'm your four-eyed professor, Chris Levens, and I'm super excited to talk to you today. Our roll call is for new and experienced ODs, optometry students, and even those just interested in this profession. We'll cover a number of topics together, and I'll help you see them through a professor's eyes. Please take your seats. School's in session. Thanks, everybody, for coming back to the Four-Eyed Professor podcast today. Those of you who have attended to them regularly will understand that I've had a number of episodes about incorporating clinical research into practice across pretty much all practice settings. This really is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I think pretty much widely it's not fully understood, and it's pretty much low-tapped opportunity for a lot of people. And so we're going to continue on that vein today and probably into the future as well. One of the key things is, besides being a well-organized practice and understanding the type of patient base you see. So what I mean by that is if you see a lot of contact lenses, well, maybe you could get involved into contact lens trials. If you see a lot of patients with ocular surface disease, for example, you could see some trials in dry eye, for example. Maybe you see a lot of ocular disease. And so basically, once you get an idea and a reminder of where your practice patient base falls in, then you can look for opportunities. The next step, though, is understanding and selecting a study coordinator. And so that's really going to be the topic of today. So I'm going to bring to the stage Amy Bland. Amy, thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Hey, Dr. Levens, thanks for having me.
Oh, I love it. So we are going to talk about the role of what a study coordinator is and what this means. But before we even go there, please introduce yourself to the audience and let them know a little bit about you.
Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. As Dr. Levens said, my name is Amy Bland, and I am a certified clinical research coordinator as well as a certified ophthalmic assistant. I've been working in clinical research for over 10 years now, primarily in optometry, ophthalmology setting, but I've also done some advanced heart failure, neurology, and stroke research.
Fantastic. So did your career in clinical research start in eye care or did it start in neurology?
It actually started in eye care. So I got my start in eye care when I was in the Air Force, actually. So they set me up for a really awesome career. And I think like most people in clinical research, we don't start out going, oh, I can't wait to do clinical research. It really kind of turns more into, I kind of found this and I really love it and I want to do more of it.
Yeah, totally. Well, by the way, my wife and I were both Air Force veterans, so aim high.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your service.
You as well. So did the Air Force place you in this role? Did you seek out this role? And so what were some of your early experiences?
So the Air Force put me in ophthalmology world. And then I graduated, went to college, got my bachelor's, and was actually thinking of applying to optometry school. And ended up working at an ophthalmology practice and moved with an ophthalmologist to get started practice for him in San Antonio. And he was doing clinical research. And he said, you're going to be great at this. And I said, I don't know anything about it. And he's like, it's okay. You'll do great. And so sure enough, we ran with it and it was fantastic. And I really loved it. From there, I went to the University of Oklahoma, their ophthalmology, and I worked in their ophthalmology department, research department. And then I moved on to advanced heart failure, cardiology, neurology, and stroke research.
So before we get into the precise roles and responsibilities and what the definition of a study coordinator is, obviously, you mentioned a doctor saw some attributes in you. So in layman's terms, what are some of the attributes that you would describe of a human being that you would predict would be in tune with this type of a role? Like what type of characteristics should we be looking for?
Yeah, so in a lot of the practices, I think you're looking for a individual who's motivated to learn things. They're not happy just with the status quo. They're always asking questions. They're always looking for more. Hey, what can I how can I learn more about this? Or can I go to this meeting, and things along those lines. There needs to be an attention to detail. I think you will know, kind of in the military, that's what we do a lot of. And I think that's where a lot of those attributes kind of came out for me. But making sure that they understand that in clinical research, yes, you're seeing patients, but you have to see them in a specific way. You have to do certain things. And so making sure that they have that attention to detail and the ability to manage multiple things on their plate at once. Because you may have a patient calling in saying, hey, I need to reschedule my appointment. We have to make sure it's in the right window. Hey, I'm seeing, you're in the middle of seeing a patient in the clinic, as well as the, physician needs your help with an adverse event that they're looking at for a patient. So you just being able to juggle multiple things.
Yeah, well said. I wholeheartedly agree with the way you described that. So now, a clinical research coordinator, how would you define what exactly this role is, and what it exactly means?
We lovingly call ourselves chaos coordinators. But essentially, you're the right-hand man. You are your principal investigator's primary person. You are the person they come to for questions and answers, and you're the liaison between your doctor, your investigator, and the sponsor, the person that's conducting the clinical trial. So you're kind of handling a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So let's say tomorrow your practice has been selected to participate in protocol XYZ. What are some of the things that you look towards in terms of trying to get an idea of how this study is going to flow in your practice?
So as the research coordinator, one of the first things you do is you sit down with your doctor, and you guys go through the protocol, and you look and you say, what tests are they going to need us to do? How long am I going to have to spend with this patient? How long is the doctor going to spend with this patient? What does our schedule look like at these different testing sites? Are you doing all the testing as the coordinator, or, are you still relying on clinic techs to help you with some of that? Most places I've been the research coordinator kind of does it all from start to finish to make sure everything gets done appropriately. So if the patient needs fundus photos, you're doing the fundus photos. If they need pachymetry, you're doing the pachymetry. And so making sure that what all's going to be expected at what interval and how that's going to impact the clinic schedule. And then you kind of work backwards from there. How many patients can we enroll? Like, do we have the bandwidth in our schedule to enroll 10, 15, 20 patients for this? Or is this particular protocol a really big lift? So maybe we're only looking at enrolling 5 patients.
Yeah, I love what you said there. It's completely accurate. And that's definitely the process that we would employ as well. So if we're looking at a protocol, right now we actually spent a lot of time in the front of the eye, and now we migrated towards the back of the eye for a couple of projects upcoming. And so one of the first things, as you articulated, is to look at. So to me, clinical research is kind of like a practice within a practice. So a typical practice, the provider, with your staff would say to each other, all right, so how many patients could I see in a given day? Am I going to see patients every 30 minutes, every 15 minutes, every 60 minutes, to make sure that one patient doesn't intentionally or accidentally bleed into the other? So you have an efficient, well-run practice day. Well, research is exactly the same. It's just that you may have a project that lasts multiple years. You may have a project that lasts a month or a few months. And so being able to look at, all right, so what exact tests do we have to do? Who's doing these tests? How long do these tests take? When an issue arises, what's plan B? And once you do that, you can understand, all right, so I'm going to see a research patient in this study every 5 minutes or every hour and a half, and everything in between. Understanding that if this is a multi-year study, this is going to be something in our practice for quite a while. If it's a short-term study, we're going to begin, complete it, and then be done, and then on to the next one. But the view of this from 30,000 feet is very similar to what we would all do in just typical practice of patients to understand our schedule.
Yeah. And I think one of the things to kind of keep in mind too is the time required after that time in the clinic, right? So it's not just, oh, I'm going to see this patient and I'm going to spend an hour with them in the clinic and then it's all done, right? You then have, I would say, just if you spent 2 hours with the patient in clinic, you probably have 2 hours worth of paperwork to do afterwards.
Sure.
And so you can do it two different ways. I've seen folks that are like, I'm going to see my patient for 2 hours, and then I'm going to spend 2 hours doing the paperwork, or they're going to front load their schedule. Today is patient day, tomorrow is paperwork day. And either way works, just whatever works for you. Maybe your doctor's not in clinic the next day, so it makes sense to see all the patients on one day and do the paperwork the next day. Or, maybe it's easier to do it all in one day. It varies by practice.
Yeah. So, just like we talked about scheduling, the way I would frame the post-patient work is, so whatever practice we see patients in today, in all likelihood, you're using electronic health record A and I'm using electronic health record B. And if we change to a new practice, we're going to be using electronic health record C. Well, research is the same in terms of its data is captured and entered and stored in a number of different ways. Some are stored and captured on paper with pen on paper. Some are computer. Some are paper and then transcribed to computer later. So it's just like each project is like running its own electronic health record. And in terms of how you decide to accurately, timely enter the data in wherever the long-term storage is yours and the sponsor's choice. But I would, in my mind, I kind of frame it like working in a new EHR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the I've seen mostly electronic data capture systems of late, that everyone's using electronic. And most of the time they're pretty easy to adjust to. It's just a little click button here and a click button there, and you're kind of mirroring things from what you captured in clinic. But it still takes time.
So as you initially, at the beginning, got your feet wet with this role and responsibilities of a clinical research coordinator, what types of training did you go through to be able to be certified to partake in such an activity?
So good clinical practices training, ICH guideline training, those are usually provided by the sponsor, but there are some free websites where you can get that training. And I'm happy to provide a link if someone wants to email me. I'll be happy to share that with you guys. It's a great way to get started. I have no connection with this, but there's a really great book online. It's called Clinical Research Coordinator Handbook. You can get it on Amazon. It's a little paperback. I think they're in the 6th edition now, maybe 7th edition, but it's really great. And it kind of breaks everything out. Research is highly acronym based. And so it kind of has a glossary for you to look at. And it talks about all the things and maybe some things that you haven't seen yet, but you should be ready for. I think those are the two biggest things that you can kind of do on your own. But other than that, I had a really great mentorship program with one of the sponsors that we worked with. They had someone that was there to kind of walk through all of the firsts with me. And that gave me a lot of confidence moving forward. It's like, I know what I'm doing now. I feel ready for all of this.
Yeah. I want to just to reiterate and repeat what you just said. The training that's required to partake in research as a clinical research coordinator or as an investigator for that matter is consistent. It's oftentimes provided by a sponsor, or if not, there's sites to navigate this to either low or very minimal charge. It's online training. It's good training, but it's not difficult by any means. And so this whole theme of me launching into podcasts about incorporating clinical research into practice, the barriers to do this are really not large barriers. There are some things that you need to do, but really by no means are these massive undertakings that only a certain few people can accomplish. Mm-hmm. Just about everybody can take these on.
Yeah. And, I think, what we've seen in clinical research is there's just such a small number of physicians and practices that are participating. And so the data is just not as diverse as we would like to see.
Sure.
And so I would love to see everyone doing it, giving opportunities to patients to have access to maybe some new technologies that are not out yet, but then also just knowing that you helped further the world of optometry. You helped bring a new device, contact lens, therapeutic to market that's now changing people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective as an investigator, the giving back piece is definitely a large part of it. But also, there's a guilty pleasure of I get to have an opinion about something that nobody else has their hands or eyes on yet. Early access to
Yeah.
treatments, devices, drugs, what have you, is a huge advantage.
Right. And then when that product gets to market, you can easily tell your patients with confidence, like, I've seen this work. I've seen this firsthand in the clinical trial. I've seen the way that this works, and then you can easily market yourself as an expert with that new therapy because you already have the experience with it.
So, what, if anything, has surprised you in this role? Was there something that you were thinking that it was going to be one way, and it really, as it turned out, whether it's job role related or study related, it pivoted and went a different way?
I think I was really more surprised at how patient protective it is. There is a whole lot of regulations, the training that we go through to make sure that the patients are protected, that we're not doing anything coercive, we're not doing anything immoral. We are making sure that if a patient needs something, maybe they're in a protocol and the protocol says they can't use beta blocker eye drops because they're testing something else. If we're seeing data in that clinical trial for that particular patient that it's not working, we discontinue them. We go ahead and get them what they need. There's that misconception of we're guinea pigs, we can't do certain things. And I think that's what has surprised me the most is how patient protective it actually is.
So, all right. So, in terms of the study timeline, you mentioned that so you may be contacted, you and your investigator may be contacted about participating in an upcoming project, and you get a decent idea what this thing involves. One of the things that will be asked of you is, well, do you want to be involved? Number one, and then number two, how many patients do you think you can enroll? And so that's where you kind of have to look at time, your time availability, and your practice patient base to see do you have the patients that will satisfy the requirements for entry. And I think like pretty much common sense in life, you want to accurately respond. You don't want to overpromise because that's not good for you or the sponsor.
Right.
If anything, over deliver. So that then, let's say we're in the study.
Mhm.
What interactions do you then have with a sponsor of a project during the study? And then once you've completed the last visit of the last subject, what then happens after the study?
So during the study, the sponsors are very involved. They are going to come to your practice. You're going to have monitoring visits where essentially they come to your practice, they look through your data, they make sure that what you're saying is happening with these patients is actually happening. We have always set aside time for the monitors, but in specific time blocks. So you can have an hour of our time 30 minutes after we open. You can have an hour of our time either right before lunch or right after lunch. And you can have an hour of our time 30 minutes before the day is over so that you're not stuck sitting next to somebody all day long looking through paperwork. You're able to kind of keep doing the things that you need to do to keep your practice moving forward. So that can feel time consuming, but making sure that you do spend time with them so that they can verify the information you're providing them is correct. And then there are queries. So when you put information in there, did you make a typo? Did you put somebody's IOP was 61 instead of 16? And is that correct? And so in that electronic system, they will say, can you verify this is correct? And so you'll see those kind of things that are a constant reminder, constant check-in with you from the sponsors. And then a lot of times too, they want to see your screening and enrollment logs. And those are things that says, I looked at this patient today, they didn't qualify. I looked at this patient today, we talked to them, they said they didn't want to participate. Or we enrolled this patient today, we talked to them, they signed consent, we're moving forward with them. And so they're always going to be asking you, hey, how's it going there? What's going on? How can we help you? How's your enrollment? Is there anything that we can do? It's a partnership. They're there to support you just like you're there to support their clinical study.
So I was at a meeting yesterday where I heard an interview being taken place about somebody who eventually became into the eye field, but initially tried some other professions out. And one of the things that he described to me, I don't think I'm ever going to forget. So I'm going to ask you the question that he recommends people ask as they're considering different roles in different jobs. So you've articulated pretty well of the attributes that are needed to be a research study coordinator. You've talked about some of the good things about being involved in research, some of the things it brings to you. But what's the worst part of your job?
Me personally, because I don't know if you can tell, I am an extreme extrovert. I love to talk to people. So for me, it's the regulatory, it's the sitting behind the computer screen and counting the patients and making sure that, all of that kind of stuff is corrected. But I love the patient interaction. Like I love the getting to spend time with them and getting to know them and all of that. So it makes it worth it for me. I've had another coworker. She loved regulatory. It was her jam. I mean, she was my favorite person because we did a lot of piggybacking on each other. Like, hey, if you help me with this, I'll help you with that. And so, I think it depends on your personality. But that's the beauty of research is I think there's a little bit of something for everybody in there, depending on what you want. One of the places that I worked previously, we didn't have a career ladder. We called it our career tree. Since a lot of clinical research is on the job training, we would bring people in as research assistants, and then they would have the option as they kind of learned a little bit about everything, whether it was data management or regulatory or clinical research coordinating. Then they would kind of decide, yeah, I like the patient aspect more, or no, I like the behind the scenes, just working on the data only, or I want to deal with all the regulations. And so we kind of groomed them which way they wanted to go and then moved them up that tree, depending on which section they wanted to head into.
Yeah. Yeah. From the investigator perspective, part of me wants to dive in the pool and just hit it and hit the project running and full steam ahead. But I do have to purposely put the brakes on because I have found much better success when, as you mentioned, we look at the protocol very, very carefully, because in all likelihood, we've done all these type of tests before, but in all likelihood, probably not in the order of which the protocol asks of us to do these tests. Right. And maybe we've assessed this part of the eye, but not with the exact same grading scale that's being asked in a protocol. So looking at those two things, I'm a huge fan of doing dry runs, a walkthrough to make sure that we know step A, step B, step C. Oh, no. We made a mistake here. Go backwards and let's do step C again. And then I'm also a huge fan of scheduling one subject, first go round, and go from beginning to end to see where the challenges are. And then just like anything in life, once you understand and you get fluent in the process, now you can dive in because you're off to the races. But subject one typically goes much slower than subject 3, 4, and 5 because, again, when I frame it as it's like using a new EHR, you understand that it's kind of common sense, but not having navigated and hitting the right buttons and knowing to go forward and backwards can be challenging. But once you understand it, you really, really become fascinated.
Yeah. And I want to point out to your audience who maybe is not super aware, but there are things in research called protocol deviations. And that means that you didn't follow the protocol exactly like it was supposed to. And you have to report that to the sponsor. And then they report that to the IRB. And the FDA knows about every protocol deviation in that study. And so that's why it's so important that we do those things for these patients, because patient one, I would say 100% of the time has at least one protocol deviation in it. Whether it's we read the protocol and we thought it said this, and then the sponsor says, no, it doesn't say that, it says this. And so there can be the interpretation of the protocol, as well as just like the patient called last minute and canceled their appointment for the third time, and now they're out of window, and that's a deviation. And so all of those things, like you said, are so important.
I love what you said there. So if we make this an example of clinical practice, as a practitioner, I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But most of the time, unless they're big mistakes, nobody knows what mistakes we make. But in clinical research, again, we're human beings. We will all make mistakes, but everybody, at least somebody identifies the mistakes. And so you have to have thick skin and be willing and open to acknowledge your errors. So when I make an error, usually my study coordinator will let me know of that error and we rectify it right away. But sometimes both of us miss it, and then it's identified by the sponsor and we correct it later. But that's just understanding that we try our due diligence to be as precise and accurate and consistent and repeatable as possible. But we're still human and we will make some erroneous errors. We just try to make sure and hope that they're small errors and not massive, massive problems.
Right. And so maybe one of the characteristics I left out hearing you talk now is that humility. There has to be a certain level of humility between yourself and the principal investigator. You have to be willing to admit those mistakes. You have to be willing to receive that feedback from the sponsors, as well as your research coordinator that comes to you and says, hey, doc, I know you want to do this, but the protocol says no. Are you sure you still want to move forward with this, or something along those lines?
Right. Well, this has really been great, Amy. I'm sure it's been helpful to a lot of people as well. So in closing, are there some closing thoughts that you have for people that might have an interest in doing a role similar to yours, or practice team that's really, really strongly considering getting into clinical research? What are some things that you recommend for them to think about?
So I think if a practice is thinking about getting into clinical research, you kind of need three things. Your kind of first three steps that you're thinking of. You said it. Number one, evaluate your patient population. Make sure that you know the patients that you're looking for, and does that match a study. Number two, let's get your infrastructure in place. Let's do that training that we talked about. Let's consider buying a cabinet that has a lock on it, making sure you have somewhere to store your investigational product. Make sure that you've read those regulations and And then number three, get your name out there. Start talking to the reps that bring those drugs in. Hey, we're looking at starting clinical research. Next time you go to a big meeting like Vision Expo or one of the other academy, talk to the folks at those booths and say, hey, we're thinking about starting clinical research. Can I talk to your clinical development team? For someone that's interested to become a clinical research coordinator, apply for the job, talk to your doctor, say, hey, I kind of want to do this. Do you think it's a possibility? How can we do this? Because there is a need for clinical research coordinators out there everywhere, not just in optometry, ophthalmology area. And it's a really, really wonderful career path that I am super passionate about. It's actually not actively acknowledged by the Department of Labor as a career field, but we're working on that for research coordinators. And I just think it's going to continue to grow. And it's an amazing, wonderful, rewarding career path. And reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me. I'm happy to share my experiences, my information, any tools. I am not afraid to give all of the details to anybody that's interested.
I love it. Well, thanks again, Amy. You've been a wonderful host, and I really do think this is critically important information.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Class is ended for today, and we have no exams or grades approaching. Please email me at foureyeedprofessor@gmail.com if there are topics that you would like to hear and see through a professor's eyes.